What's up guys, it's your girl Brianna aka Mini Marley, and I am finally back on my channel to tell you guys all about my labor and delivery story. I feel like I haven't been on here in forever, and it pretty much has been because I haven't spoken to you since before I had the baby. So yes, if you've been out of the loop, you haven't followed me on Instagram and Snapchat yet, I don't know why. Yes, I did have the baby about a month ago. I had her on December 5th. And yeah, I want to share with you guys exactly what happened the day that little Stella Grace came into this world. So let's just jump right into this story. Okay, so just to give you guys a little bit of background, me and Michael were living in New York City before I had the baby, and we decided that we were going to move to Florida because we wanted to be closer to my family because it would be a really big help after the baby. My mom works from home, she does hair, but she's pretty much always available and she would be free to help me out with Stella, and I just really wanted her to be around, especially at this time in my life because I needed my mom, as a lot of pregnant women do. So we decided to move, and I was about 36 weeks when I moved down to Florida. So I came by myself with my cat Penny. We flew down, and Michael stayed in New York because he was gonna pack up the rest of our apartment and drive it down. So during that week, I went to see my obstetrician here, and she basically just gave me an overall checkup. She wanted to see how I was doing since she was taking me on so late in my pregnancy. Just wanted to make sure that everything was okay. So that was actually the first time that I got my cervix checked. So she checked my cervix that day, and I was actually 2 centimeters dilated, which I wasn't expecting at all. One, because I had never had my cervix checked before, so I just didn't think that early I would already be dilated. And she said that 2 centimeters was actually a little bit far ahead for 36 weeks. Usually it's about 0 or 1, but 2 was like, okay, you're probably gonna have this baby a little bit early. So I told that to Michael. You know, my mom was with me at the appointment. We're just like, oh my gosh, the baby might be here a little early, but you know, we weren't thinking much of it. So the other thing that she wanted to check was my amniotic fluid. She wanted to make sure that the level was good and we're good to go. So she scheduled me for an ultrasound. So the ultrasound was on Friday, and I went in, and basically the ultrasound tech checked my amniotic fluid, and it was pretty low. It wasn't like low in a startling way, but it was lower than they would want it to be. So they encouraged me to drink a lot of water, and they said that they were going to keep monitoring it to make sure that it either went back up or it wasn't dropping too low. The other thing that the ultrasound technician told me was that the baby was breech. So the baby was head down basically throughout my entire pregnancy. I had never had to worry about what if the baby's breech, anything like that. And I thought by 36 weeks, the fact that she was head down, she was pretty much going to stay there and everything was going to go smoothly. But to my surprise, when I went in for my ultrasound, she was head up. And this was really surprising because I had just went to my doctor the week before, and I got an ultrasound every week throughout my pregnancy. The doctor that I saw at their practice, that's just what they did. And like I said, she was always head down. So just a week before, she was head down. So yes, the baby was breech. I was freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do all this different stuff to get her to turn because I really wanted to have a natural birth, and I definitely didn't want to have a C-section. So yes, I left the ultrasound tech on Friday, and my doctor, once she got the information about the baby turning and my amniotic fluid being low, she wanted me to go into the hospital on Sunday just to get everything checked out and make sure that my fluid was either going back up or staying at a decent level, or else they were going to have to induce labor early. So I went into the hospital on Sunday. I went in with my mom and my sister. Now, we were not planning on it being a long visit or anything like that. We thought we're just going to run in after church and then we're going to leave because we actually had a family gathering that evening. And yeah, I was actually supposed to go in early in the morning before church, and I had even planned on running to the hospital, getting my little ultrasound, and then going to church. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to church first. Let's go do the ultrasound after. So my mom and sister happened to be with me at the time. So we go in and they hook me up to the fetal heart rate monitor. They hook up my blood pressure and they tell me that I'm going to be sitting there for either 30 minutes to an hour because they need to check the baby's heartbeat to make sure that it is doing regular stuff. They said it tends to rise and then go back down and rise and go back down. And they just wanted to make sure that it was normal and everything was good. And then after that, they were going to give me my ultrasound. So I'm like, oh, this is going to take longer than I thought, but whatever. So I'm actually sitting there. I am listening to the baby's heartbeat. This is the first time I've actually been hooked up to a fetal heart rate monitor and been able to hear her heartbeat for a long time. So that was pretty cool. Then all of a sudden, as I'm listening to the baby's heartbeat, talking to my mom, I hear the heart rate drop really, really low and my blood pressure goes really high. So the baby's heart rate tend to range around about 158, 160. It was doing good, and then all of a sudden it dropped to 90 beats per minute, which was really low. And I noticed that it was low because as I'm talking to my mom, I just hear it start going really, really slow. And of course that really worried me because I'm like, what happened? And before I could even call a nurse to come in and check that her heartbeat was okay, the nurse runs in and she's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? The baby seems a little upset, what's going on? So I'm like, is everything okay? I'm starting to worry a little bit. And she's like, your blood pressure is also going up really high. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was pretty high. And she's like, yeah, the baby's heartbeat just dropped. It went really low. That's not normal. That shouldn't happen. But we're just going to keep monitoring you. I'm going to call your doctor and let her know that happened. So they called the doctor and I'm sitting there, and while they're doing that, my blood pressure goes up really high again and the baby's heartbeat drops back to like 89, 87. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why does this keep happening? At this point, I'm starting to panic a little. And of course, that's not good because that just keeps my blood pressure up and it's going to stress out the baby. So they finally get in touch with my doctor, and my doctor says if that happens one more time, 3 times, then they're going to induce labor. And at that point, I'm just like, what do you mean induce labor? Like, you're not going to induce labor? That's still processing in my head. I just never thought that these things were going to happen. My pregnancy had been so smooth. I pretty much had no issues. So I was a little bit shocked. So at that point, I'm just like, okay, Brianna, breathe, relax, calm down. We cannot let this happen a 3rd time because I cannot be induced. And then sure enough, the baby's heart rate drops again, really low, and my blood pressure skyrockets. And then they tell me, all right, let's go. We're going to have to check you in because we're going to induce labor. The doctor said she wanted to induce it if it happened again, and it keeps happening. This isn't safe, so let's go. Oh my gosh, it took me a really long time to process that. I'm literally walking to my room. I had just walked into the hospital and saw a little baby in their little crib, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be me in a couple weeks. And all of a sudden now I'm walking to my room and I'm gonna be having my baby any day now. So my mom calls Michael because Michael is still in New York City, just, packing up our stuff, chilling, taking his time. And she's like, okay, we called the doctor. This and this happened, and Brianna is going to be in labor in the next day or 2. You have to come down here. So me and Michael are talking, and it's so funny because we both hadn't wrapped our head around it yet. So he was like, should I really come right now? Are you guys sure? And my mom is like, yes, get on a flight, come now if you don't want to miss it. So basically, Michael hopped on a flight that day, and he was in Miami by Sunday night. So after they checked me in, one of the first things that they did was they put me on magnesium, which is something that they use to regulate blood pressure. They wanted to make sure that my pressure was good and steady and the baby was okay. So I was on magnesium. I had an IV, and they also put in a catheter. Oh, I hated the catheter. That was literally one of the worst parts to me. It was just so uncomfortable, and it was just horrible. And from the time that they checked me in on Sunday all the way up until the day after I had the baby, I was on bed rest completely. I could not get up, which is also much worse than I thought. Being on bed rest and just sitting there, your butt's hurting, everything, you can't really move. You really just want to get up and walk around a little, and you're just stuck there, especially with the catheter. That part just really sucked. So I was on magnesium, like I said, and then they told me that they were going to give me Cervidil, which basically thins out your cervix and gets it ready to, dilate and everything. And they told me they were going to give me Cervidil at around 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. And they said that once they gave me that lasted for 12 hours. So about 5:30 a.m. on Monday morning, they would check my cervix again, and hopefully it would be a little more thinned out. And if it wasn't thin enough, they would give me another dose of Cervidil. And then eventually they'd give me Pitocin. That would induce labor. And I would probably have the baby by Monday evening or even Tuesday morning, because the whole induction process might take that long. So as the evening progresses, the cervidil is basically kicking in, it's doing its thing, but I'm not experiencing any painful contractions yet. I am experiencing contractions, but they weren't painful, they weren't too close together, anything was just very light, and yeah, everything was fine. So later that evening, by the time Michael came, I was still feeling fine. I was having contractions, but they were really fine. I was able to talk, I was still pretty relaxed. My aunt and my mom were there, so we're all talking, just like, oh my gosh, the baby's really about to be here, but everything's still fine. And I was started to take notes around that time, and I was basically just jotting down everything that they were giving me at the hospital, basically how everything had happened that day. And at this time, in my notes, it says that I was pretty much fine, everything was Gucci. And as the night progressed, I really started to feel the contractions a lot stronger. They were starting to hurt, they were more painful. And I actually remember telling my mom and Michael, is this supposed to hurt already? Because they said, you know, I wouldn't really be going into active labor until Monday evening or Tuesday morning. And they're like, yeah, there's no way that it's supposed to be hurting that much right now. You really just can't tolerate pain, but you want to have a natural birth, blah, blah, blah. They're talking all of this crap, and I'm basically like, you know, wow, this is going to be really painful. But little did I know the process was moving along a lot faster than I actually thought, but I'll explain. So around 1:30 in my notes, it says that my contractions were at a pain level 6, and I was like, yes, I'm ready for a little bit of pain medication, because my nurse had asked me throughout the night to let her know whenever I wanted some pain medication. So at about 1:30, they gave me 2 drugs, Nuban and Zofran. Now the Zofran is basically to take away nausea, because I had thrown up about 2 times already that night. Once it started to get a lot more painful around 1 a.m. and stuff like that. So that's why they gave me Zofran. And then the Nuban was the pain medication. And honestly, that really just hit me so hard. It made me feel really dizzy at first, and then it just made me completely just space out. I was just in my zone, and I was so calm and relaxed. That Nuban was just, it really did the trick. So by the next morning, of course, the drugs had worn off. The contractions were really painful. And in my notes, it said that they were at a pain level 8. And I keep referring to my notes about the pain level, because they really say that after you have a baby and everything, it's like you can't remember the pain. And I honestly really can't. I know that it was painful, and I know that after a while I was just like, drugs, please. But I really can't remember that pain. But according to my notes, I had gone from a 6 to a level 8, and I was really just in pain. The contractions were a lot harder and faster, coming closer together, and they were getting ready to check if the cervidil had thinned out my cervix, and it was about 6 a.m. So around 6 a.m. they checked, and my cervix had thinned out a lot more than they expected. And I actually remember the nurse saying that I would probably still only be 1 centimeter dilated, because the cervidil isn't meant to make you dilate, it's just to thin out the cervix. But I was actually already 3 centimeters dilated when they checked, and by now I was just really in a lot of pain, and they told me that it was actually time to start Pitocin already. So they started me on Pitocin at about 7 a.m., which is a lot sooner than they had expected. And by now the pain level is at an 8.5, 9. I'm telling them I actually am ready to have the epidural. So just to backtrack a little bit, they had told me once they checked me in and everything, they were like, I know you want to have a natural birth, but your blood pressure keeps going up really high, and the baby's heartbeat drops every time that happens. So if you decide not to get the epidural, it might be a lot more strenuous on you. It's going to put a lot of pressure on you, and of course that makes your blood pressure go up. So it's kind of, you know, you need to think about that and decide what you want to do. So I had already decided that if it came down to a medical thing where the doctors were like, you know, you probably should get the epidural, I was just gonna get it. I was never like so adamant about doing the natural thing that I was willing to risk anything. So I decided already that I was gonna get the epidural. So at around 8:40 a.m. they tell me, okay, it's time to check your cervix again. We need to see if you're dilating. And the nurse is like, right now you probably won't even be at 4 centimeters yet. You know, it takes a couple hours to get to 4 centimeters, and we just started you on Pitocin, so don't worry if you're not dilating yet, but we're gonna check check you. So she goes ahead and she checks, and she's like, oh my gosh, you're already at 6 or 7 centimeters. So that is pretty crazy. They finally are like, okay, we just have to run some labs, and once we get the lab results, then we'll give you the epidural. So it ends up taking them over an hour just to get the lab results, and by now I'm pretty much at 8 centimeters dilated. I'm contracting like crazy. It is so intense, and I'm like, hello, what are you doing? Please get me this epidural. So around 9:30 a.m. I finally get the epidural, and that hurt so bad. It really hurt because I had to just sit there so still, even though I was having such intense contractions. And the lady that was giving me the epidural also said that my spine was swollen, so it was really hard for her to get in there. So it just took a really long time. It wasn't quick at all. She was there for a long time trying to get this done, and once she finally did, it was so relieving once it finally kicked in. So right after I get the epidural, my mom and my aunt get to the hospital, and the nurse tells me that the doctor just came to the hospital and he's going to be making rounds. He'll check my cervix, and he'll probably come back a little later when it's time to push. So the doctor comes in and he checks me, and I'm actually already 9 centimeters. So like I said, it's progressing so fast. There was never a time when I was just like, waiting to dilate. It was just happening so fast. Every time the nurses or the doctor would check my cervix, I would be so much farther along than they were expecting. So when the doctor comes in and sees I'm already 9 centimeters, he's like, all right, it's time to get going actually. Like, get this, get that, let's go. They turn on the big bright light. They put up my bed. They're like, all right, we're about to get this show on the road. And I'm just like, it's time to push. Honestly, by that point, the epidural had kicked in. Literally, the epidural came just in time. If I had gotten the epidural like 10 minutes later, I probably would have felt everything while I was pushing. I literally experienced everything, all of the pain, right up until the exact last minute. It kicked in right in time, and then I was pushing. By this time, they're like, we're going to get ready to start pushing, and whenever you feel that pressure, we're going to do 3 pushes. So during each contraction, it would be 3 pushes. And yeah, so before I knew it, it was ready to start, and the doctor's like, okay, push. So I had the first contraction, I pushed 1, 2, 3 times. I had the second contraction, they're like, push harder. I pushed 1, 2, 3 times. The third contraction, I pushed 1, 2, 3, and Stella was there. It was so crazy. The doctor actually had me reach down and feel her head and everything. When the baby came out, it was just crazy. They passed her to me, and she was screaming, crying, and so tiny. She was born 5 pounds 3 ounces, which is pretty small. So she was a little tiny baby, and it was just magical. It was amazing. I was so happy that it was finally over, that she was out, she was healthy, she was crying, she had all her fingers and all her toes, and it was just amazing. Michael actually teared up a little bit, and the doctor told him to come over and cut the umbilical cord. I actually have pictures of him doing that. And yes, that's how Stella was born. She came out at 5 pounds 3 ounces. She was born at 10:21 on December 5th. I did have to get a small episiotomy, the little snip, and that sucked as far as recovery. But other than that, everything pretty much went smoothly. It went super fast. I went into the hospital for a checkup on a Sunday morning, and by the next morning on Monday, I had Stella. They induced me, and that is my story. So it's been over a month. It's already halfway into January, which is crazy. So Stella is already about a month and a half. She's about 6 weeks, and it's crazy to see how much she's grown already, how much she's changed, how much fatter she's gotten. She's actually already 8 pounds and 6 ounces the last time we went to the doctor just a couple of days ago, and she's growing really well. She's doing really great. She's healthy. I have been breastfeeding, which has been okay. I have a ton of milk, so that's not a problem, but getting her to latch on without it hurting has been a little bit of a struggle, but it's definitely a learning process, and it's just so rewarding every time they smile at you and every time they do something new. So I've completely been in love. I'm loving it, and I'm learning. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm definitely going to be doing a lot more videos now that I'm finally back recording. My little maternity leave is baby's over. I will be showing you guys Stella's nursery in a couple of days. It's pretty much done. I'm just putting a little final touches on it. I actually also have a bath video of me giving Stella one of her first baths using some Shea Moisture products that they sent me, which are amazing. And I also want to share with you guys some of my must-haves for baby's first month. Some of the products that I've been using. If you're a mom out there, you're planning for your little bundle of joy, these are some things that I could not have gotten through my first month without. So I will be sharing all of that with you shortly, as well as other stuff. If you're not here for the baby stuff, girl, I got you. I have a fashion video coming up soon, some hair tutorials. Let me know what you guys want to see. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed seeing and meeting baby Stella for the first time and hearing the story of her birth. Peace out, guys, and I will see you in my next video.